Paul Beeston is arguably one of the most famous names in the world of Canadian baseball. An impressive accomplishment for a man who never swung a bat or threw a pitch.
It all began in 1976 when Beeston was hired as the first employee of the expansion Toronto Blue Jays franchise. He started in the ticket office, spent more than a decade in senior management, and became president and CEO in 1989. 3 years later came what were perhaps the best seasons the Blue Jays have ever known.
Now the 2-2. Well hit down the left field line. Way back and Joe Carter with a 3-run homer. The winners and still world champions, the Toronto Blue Jays.
The team won back-to-back championships in 1992 and 1993. Since then, nothing. This year, fans, players, and management alike are preparing for what will hopefully be the team's first playoff trip in more than 2 decades.
Well, to start with the obvious, how are you feeling about things these days?
Feel well. I mean, this is what it's all about. Having games at the end of September that actually mean something. We can talk about the month of October, but at the end of September, when you get there, the games are just as tough to win at that point in time. I've been trying to tell everybody here, when you get into September, no matter who you're playing, they're tough games to win. And you know what? So it's got an atmosphere to it. The fans are here, and everyone is happy, and everyone is engaged, and so it makes it pretty easy.
It feels different. It does feel like something has changed. What do you think is going on?
Well, I don't know. I think it just is happening. I mean, I remember the first time I've been through it, when you're expected to win and, you have this kind of drifting up. And then all of a sudden this year, Alex made all these trades the last week of July. And then, it became a happening. We started to win. We started playing good defense. We started to win early. We started to win late. Pitching started to come around. And, all of a sudden, everybody kind of caught on, and then it caught on in the city, it caught on in the province, it caught on in the country. Television ratings went up. Fans really got engaged, which I don't think should be lost on anybody, because the players all talk about it, like how much they like playing in front of these engaged fans that are a part of it. And so it's just been incredible to watch. I haven't seen it before, because I know when the last time we went through this, it was from '84 to '92, a long time. But this one just happened.
And from that period, a few things happened. I've met a lot of people who said, I was right there in the early 90s. We remember those 2 years back-to-back, the excitement of the World Series, and then the strike happened. And it really turned me off. And I think that really happened for a lot of fans. They drifted away.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that. And, there have been so much success for so many years, that there came we'll be around when you get to the American League Championship Series, we'll be around for the World Series. But there was another thing that happened to us that didn't happen to everybody else. At the same time as we had the strike, there was a lockout in hockey. And so I think that was a curse on all professional athletes. I mean, back at that point in time, what is this all about? You're making millions of dollars, and the reality of the situation is, we had the double here. We had the hockey and we had the baseball, and people just kind of turned off. And so, we thought back in '85 or '95 they would just come back. They didn't just come back, and we had to earn their right to come back. I mean, the obligation was on us. We haven't won since 1993. Now remember that, we haven't won since 1993. So we haven't given the fans anything to cheer about. Now they've got something to cheer about, and you look at the type of players that we have. I mean, we've got some of the best players in the game, whether it starts with David Price or, Jose Bautista or Donaldson or Tulowitzki or Russell Martin, and that's not to minimize the rest of the good young players. So I think you're seeing the present, but you're also seeing the future.
They say we're renting David Price. Is he around for the long haul?
Well, you'd like to think he is. I mean, he likes the city. I mean, he likes the team, and but he is a free agent, and players earn that right to determine what they want to do. You would like to think that the experience that he's had here right now is something he'd say, look, this is a place that I would like to play. But I think, we're not talking contract with him right now, because, we're all focused on the game. So I would like to think that a guy like David Price would say, boy, this has been something I never ever saw before, or never experienced in Toronto. And one thing that's lost on a lot of people is that Toronto itself is a selling tool. I mean, the city, we haven't won, the Leafs haven't won, the Raptors haven't won. You win, players want to come here. Been through it, seen it, done it, and whether it was bringing in a Paul Molitor, or whether it was bringing in Jack Morris, whether it was bringing in a Roger Clemens, you know, they like the city, they like the atmosphere, and they like living downtown. I mean, this guy takes a scooter. David Price takes a scooter to the game. You know, like, I mean, he's going down the streets. It's like, think about it. I mean, you just don't see that type of thing.
So what is the magic of putting together the right team? And that's really, if there's a core to your job, it's got to be that. It's putting the right people in place from the top of management right down to the field. Are you there?
Yeah, I think we're there. I mean, I really like Alex. I mean, I think that Alex, I mean, was a child prodigy, but now he's got 6 years in this job. So I mean, he's got the experience. We have a very good assistant general manager in Tony LaCava. We have good scouting. We have good development. And I think the basic is that he was able to make those trades. I mean, if he didn't have that core group of players, he wouldn't be able to make the trades, Amanda. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, He did it once before when we did the trade with Miami, and then the deal with Syndergaard and Darno over to get R.A. Dickey. And then, 2 years later, it's not just a matter of money. You have to have the other parts of it so he could make the trade for Tulowitzki. He could make the trade for David Price. He could make the trade for Lowe. He could make the trade for Revere. Like those players there. So, I mean, I think the organization's there. Mark Shapiro's coming in, and Mark Shapiro's a baseball guy. So, I mean, I think that's set for the future.
In terms of the player costs, the payroll, it's more and more expensive all the time, right across the league. Is it justified by results?
Yeah, I think it's justified. I mean, if you can spend the money, I mean, basically, you can always get lucky. You can get lucky with having a good young team that goes up. But the teams that are sustainable and perennial are teams that basically have the larger payrolls. Our biggest question is going to be going forward is the Canadian dollar. I mean, things change. And, it's not to make an excuse because when the place is full, it's good. But we've got to put the good product on the field, and we've got to show that we can be sustainable because that's what you want to be.
Do you need a new stadium? Is that on the
Well,
list?
look, you're talking to the wrong guy. I mean, I like the stadium. I like the stadium for a number of reasons, not the least of which has got the roof, because, we can play our games. So tonight, whether it rains, whether it snows, whatever it is, we're going to play our games. But I like it for the city. I like the fact that the Air Canada Centre is at one end of Bremner. We're at the other end of Bremner. You've got the convention center. You've got the waterfront that's opening up right now. You've got the entertainment district, and so it creates a really, really good atmosphere. Now, is it Camden Yards? No, but Camden Yards is a different set of circumstances in a different city. Is it Pittsburgh's PNC? No, it's not. It's a different set of circumstances. But for us, it works. And, the city, to me, is lucky to have this place. I mean, as opposed to, maligning it as a big piece of concrete, because, when it's full, I mean, it's exciting, and when the team is winning, it's exciting, and no one talks about the stadium. The beer is colder, the hot dogs are hotter. When the team is losing, the place is empty. It feels like maybe it's too big. But, the reality is it's ours and it's downtown, and I don't think you can beat that.
One of the things that makes your world different is corporate ownership.
Right.
Is it better? Is it worse? How does that affect the way that this place operates?
Well, I think it's different. There's no question about that. You don't have that one owner that that will actually say, I'm in it and everything else. But at the same point in time, they've hired professional management, and they pretty well leave us alone and give us the support that we want to do. On the other hand, you do have the rigors of a corporate ownership deal. I mean, you don't deny it. I mean, there is budgeting and there is, accountability. There is responsibility. There's nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, you do have competitions like you did when George was alive. Let's use George Steinbrenner as an example because he's the best example. He didn't care anything about whether he made money or anything as long as he won. His mantra or vision or, and the best was always, I would talk about these mission statements. He said, his mission statement was win World Series, repeat. Okay, that was it. That was it. He didn't care what it was going to cost as long as he was going to win.
So you don't find yourself in boardrooms saying this is why these salaries are this high and for the returns we're getting, etc.?
No, I think it's like anything else. I mean, you try to manage that, making sure that people understand and you operate on the no surprise basis. But remember, we were owned by corporations before. Like the first time I was here, we were owned by Labatt, the CIBC, and Howard Webster. And, Howard being an individual, but nevertheless, we owned the Globe, we owned the Lord Simcoe, we owned Holtz at one point and all that. He knew what it was all about. So it was corporate. And you know what? There's some advantage to that because, what you do, you'll be able to count on a little bit more of the counsel, wise counsel, the experienced counsel of how you do things.
As the Toronto Blue Jays look forward to what they hope will be a deep playoff run, President and CEO Paul Beeston is thinking about what's next. This season is his last with the club. He's leaving behind a decorated legacy for the team, the city, and indeed the whole country.
Paul Beeston didn't set out to have a career in baseball at all. His education was in economics and political science. He left behind a promising career in accounting to join an expansion baseball team. It turned out to be a good move. The team has won 2 championships during his tenure. He even ran the entire league for a few years as president and CEO of Major League Baseball. He's a member of the Order of Canada and is enshrined in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. None of these accomplishments could have been predicted 4 decades ago.
It's kind of a cliche to say, did you ever think you'd wind up here back when you were an accountant? But it's a fair question in terms of the path you took. Did you have a goal to be doing this?
Well, I always had a goal, but I got lucky. I mean, there was a chap by the name of Don McDougall who was president of Labatt at the time that offered me the job to come down here in 1976. It didn't take me long to turn down a partnership at PwC, and say, look, no, I'm going to Toronto and I'm going to try this thing out in baseball. I was only 31 years old. Your world's ahead of you. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world, never applied for the job. Now, having said that, it's been something that I never even thought would be as good as this. Every day's a Saturday for me. Some Saturdays are bad Saturdays. There's rainy Saturdays, but basically everything is pretty good. So I've considered myself very, very fortunate, very, very lucky, and I've met so many good people.
How have you managed to stay in the job this long? Because this is the kind of job that people get turfed out of a lot.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain about that. I mean, that's one I can't answer. I've tried to be honest. I've tried to operate on no surprise basis. I've tried to be part of a team, no matter what the team was. And I'm talking about the team above, so that we worked well together. And I've tried to be honest. I've tried to operate with integrity. A guy had a mentor by the name of Peter Hardy, who was one time the chairman of Labatt, and then he was on Brascan's board and everything. And he taught me about don't surprise me. Don't lie to me. I can do anything, but don't lie to me. And so I've tried to be open and honest, and and I think it's worked.
There must have been times in those barren years. Let's pretend they're over now for sure.
Right.
When people were out for your job.
Well, I'm sure they've been still out for my job. I mean, there's no question about that. You can't keep everybody happy all the time, but what you've got to do is be true to yourself. I mean, if you're true to yourself and true to your principles and work hard and, and are honest with the public. I mean, ultimately owning a sports team, well, it may be owned by individuals, it may be owned by corporations. You're operating a public trust. That's what Charles Bronfman said. You operate a public trust because the team is owned by the people. Now there are people that get rewarded by it, whether they're the owners or whether they're corporations or whatever they might be. But man, at the very end of the day, it's a public trust that you're operating for. So, I do report to Rogers and I did report to Labatt. The reality of the situation is that, everybody on the, comes to a game, you're reporting to them too. And you're reporting to the 25 players. We talk about ownership. We talk about the media. We talk about the fans. There's 25 guys there that are the engine of this whole organization that play the game that that we have to report to too. And that's why it can't be lost in what Alex was able to do this year, because he sent a message to that clubhouse, we are doing our part to bring you the best players so that we can take it forward.
You couldn't do this job and not appreciate baseball, but do you love baseball?
I always loved baseball. I had the good fortune of my father taking me to Tiger Stadium back in the 50s and 60s, and I think we sat behind every pool that was there. It was called Briggs Stadium at the time in Detroit, and so, we sat behind everything, but I loved the game of baseball, from the time. I wasn't much of an athlete, but, I did love the game of baseball, and I, have been very fortunate to not only, kind of get onto the inside of it, but, to be part of what makes it so special, which is the people. I mean, the people, whether they're scouts, whether they're development, whether they're the players, it doesn't make any difference. Whether it's the press, I mean, it's everybody together, that makes it. It's a bit, right now, the good thing about it is, and why you can be kind of excited about it, because it's a circus. I mean, like when you get into the month of September and the games mean something, there is that circus. You're watching the scoreboard, even if you say you're not, to see how the other team is doing. But it's just a fun time.
It seems like a more innocent game than some other professional sports for some reason. Is that just something I'm getting from movies?
No, I don't think. I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. I mean, there's one thing I read. When we were looking for a commissioner back in 1992, we were interviewed a guy by the name of Arnie Weber, who was the president of Northwestern University at the time. I said, why do you want this game? He said, well, why do you want this gig? He said, well, because, there's the religion, there is universities, and there is baseball. And there are 3 institutions. And baseball, the way it started in the 1800s, is the same as it is right now. They don't really change the rules. It's, 4 balls, 3 strikes, 9 innings. It's the 90 feet. It's the whole thing. He said, corporations will change. And, he listed corporations that did change, no longer exist, But baseball's what it is. But he went on to say that it's a civil game. There's a civility to it, and, it's not that kind of violent game. On the other hand, that pitcher's got that ball. And you're sitting there in the batter's box or standing there in the batter's box. It's not quite the same as, like watching a slow pitch game at the school.
Yeah. Do you think more Canadians like baseball now, and that could lead us to growth and sort of franchise growth? Could we go back to more than one team?
I would like to think that. I mean, I think, from our point of view, I think what's good for baseball in Canada is good for the Toronto Blue Jays. And if there was another team in Montreal, I think all the players that are coming along right now are the result of the Blue Jays and the Montreal Expos in the past, being part of the Major League Baseball that, expose players to it. And you think about the great players that are coming out of Toronto right now, or coming out of Toronto, I don't mean Toronto, coming out of Canada right now. I mean, guys that have won the Cy Young like Gagner, guys that have won the MVP like Morneau and Joey Votto from, just here in Toronto. But, it's more than that. There's 18, 19, 20 players. When I first got in this game, Amanda, there was one or two players from Canada, and they were basically pitchers, the Hilliers and the Ron Taylors and that group. But, now there's more and more. There's position players. And, we've done our part, I think, through Robbie Alomar. He's got tournaments. He goes from coast to coast with his clinics. And, we brought in all of our kind of old veteran players that, go along and they preach the game of baseball. But it's just such a great game.
And it is important to get it down to more grassroots level. We probably both know people who are pretty talented, but who wound up going to the U.S. because there's not that kind of opportunity here.
That's absolutely right, but we'll become the beneficiary of that. I mean, when they started going to the U.S. in the 80s and the 90s, they learned what instruction was all about. They learned how the game was played. They came back here. It is no different than the hockey. Hockey players go down into the United States, and they stay down there. And then they, get involved with their minor hockey programs down there. So the U.S. is creating a lot of really good hockey players right now. Players that grew up in Canada but went down there, parents stayed there and taught it. In our particular case, the players go down there, play baseball, they come back here, and they get involved in the minors.
Given everything that's going on with this team right now, does it not seem like the worst possible time to be thinking about leaving?
No, it's the right time. I'm 70 years old. I mean, I really don't know. I'm really not part of this new age computers and analytics and all that type of thing, And to be very frank with you, I will be around. I like to think I have my energy. It's time to do something else. So, actually, if you could ever go out on top, it would be the best time to go out as opposed to go at the bottom. Leave before they tell you to leave.
And do you have a next chapter, next plan?
Well, you got to remember, man, I was retired from 2002 to 2009, so I've got this down, and I learned one thing back then.
Well, you clearly don't know how to do it.
Work is highly overrated. Work is highly overrated. So to be quite honest with you, I will be fine. I'll get involved in volunteer work. I mean, I was very fortunate when I got out the last time to get involved with CAMH, and CAMH, I became the chairman of it, and, it wasn't just giving back. I learned so much about mental health and the necessity of taking that forward and working towards it. And it was as good an experience as winning the World Series. Now, if we hadn't won the World Series, I don't know if I would say that, but I do remember getting involved and seeing where we're going with it. So I will get involved in something, and I'll sit in a couple boards, and it'll stay in the Baseball Hall of Fame board in Cooperstown. And so I'll have my fingers in it somewhere. And
meanwhile, you're still hoping that you get to go out on top this time.
Well, boy, I sure do.
All right.
Got a shot.
We'll leave it there. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.